Welcome to the Cunning Plan Podcast. I'm here today with Miles.
Hello.
And Aaron.
Yeah.
Very gangster response there.
Love it. Love it.
So here we are. Today we're talking about video. We're talking about video equipment, filming, and we're talking about editing as well. And give you a few tips on how to do some of that stuff on a budget. How to get the most out of the equipment that you might have, stuff you might have already lying around the office, things you might already be able to use, and ways that you can kind of get the best out of stuff in the edit, even if you haven't got the greatest footage in the world, or you've got bits of footage that clients have kind of chucked at you, or you've got bits of footage that your team have been capturing, ways that you can kind of pull those together into something that looks quite cohesive and quite interesting for people to look at. So we'll kick things off with the first part of that, which is getting some footage and filming in the first instance. So I thought what we'll do is we'll start with how we capture footage on a budget. So like we haven't got money for cameras, we can't afford to hire in a camera operator. We want to do something for, let's imagine we want to do something for social media that's going to be a little bit throwaway. We're going to get it out there and then we're going to kind of see what it does, and we don't want to put too much pressure on it, not to put a big old production behind it. So imagine we've just got one of these lying around the office, or everyone's got one of those on. So how can we do something on a budget?
Well, first of all, one of these, for the people who aren't watching the video or listening to it, is an iPhone, right?
Very good, Aaron. I like that.
Got to think outside the box.
Thinking about the audio listener.
Got to think outside the box.
What I was holding there was an iPhone.
So if you've got an iPhone, or if you've got yourself a decent quality Samsung, most high-end mobile phones nowadays, you can get some really good footage. A lot of them film in HD, 1080p. Some of them nowadays film in 4K. If you're filming in 4K, it's 4,000 pixels. You're going to get a great richness in colour. It's going to look really, really good. You haven't got to go out and buy a DSLR. You haven't got to go out and buy a camcorder. You haven't got to go out and get yourself some kind of like cinematic film equipment, unless you're looking to get a cinematic film look. But you want to have something quick, something throwaway, something that's going to both get the products out there. You can use your mobile phone. There's loads of different things you can do with them. There's different apps you can get to have more functionality with your mobile phone. So for example, iPhone have got, in the App Store for iPhones and Apple products, there's one called Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro gives you a lot more ability and more settings to be able to create a slightly more interesting bit of footage, really. You can set things like your exposure level, the aperture, that kind of thing. So it gives you a bit more ability, really.
Cool. Anything that you can do? I mean, I've seen little, people sticking things on the end of their iPhone and bits and pieces like that. Anything that you can get to augment the iPhone to make it?
Yeah. So iPhones are good. They're really good, especially for photography. Photography is great with an iPhone, but when you start to try and film things, rather than having a wide depth of field, you can have a wide angled lens, you're going to have a much more of a narrower shot. So a lot of people do get cameras they can clip onto their iPhone to give them a slightly wider angle again, and to get a bit more richness in their footage as well. They're not expensive to get. Clip them on, sorted. A problem that some people will have when using their iPhones or their Samsungs or whatever high-end phone they might want to use to make a video is the stability of the shot. Anybody's watching any kind of video and it's shaky, looks like it's an earthquake, unless you're going for the earthquake look, it's not really going to work out too well, do you know what I mean? Like, depends on what part of the world you're in. In the UK, we don't really get many earthquakes. You don't want to shaky footage. Yeah, we're alright, you know what I mean? There's no fault lines along here.
Well, a big truck goes past in this building, it does actually get a little bit wobbly, doesn't it?
It can get a bit shaky. So in terms of that, I would say you can get yourself like a monopod. If you know what a monopod is, and here's one I made earlier. I didn't make it myself, I just kind of I found it.
Just found it,
to be fair, in the office.
Yeah.
But yeah, monopod's quite good. Give you a bit of stability, hold it, place the camera on top, you're sorted. You can get yourself a tripod and put it on a tripod.
Less likely people are going to trip over that as well. I guess it's good for if you're in if you need to be moving about quite a lot. Yeah. That's quite a good way of just plonking it down, keeping it stable, but not having big old legs dangling all over the place.
It's more lightweight as well than a tripod would be. It'll be more easily portable as well. So a lot of people have camera bags and so forth, or whatever kind of bag you want to have. You can just slide it in somewhere. It's pretty easy to use. Tripods are good for stability as well. Or you can just get a clip where you can clip your iPhone, Samsung, whatever kind of phone you have, which is a high-end one, which hasn't got to be high-end, whichever has the best quality of video for what you want. Clip it onto something. It could be like a bookshelf, it could be the back of a chair, depends on what you want to do. You want to get a selfie stick, you can have that kind of third person point of view, kind of feel like you're holding someone's hand and you're walking somewhere. So you can get all kinds of interesting kind of shots just from a mobile phone.
Like a Gorilla Pod, for example, they're great, aren't they, for wrapping around stuff and clipping onto things, and really super versatile for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the beauty of a mobile phone as well, with Facebook Live and Instagram Stories, it can go straight onto the internet. You're not having to edit it in post or do anything; it goes straight onto the internet. So
and sometimes that's, I feel like I've said this a billion times on every single podcast we've done, but half the battle is getting something, filming it and actually using it and actually getting it out there, because so much of what you end up doing is you capture loads of little bits of footage, or you've got this idea for this big old production which you then go off and shoot and do all this stuff with, and then a lot of people, especially if you're an internal marketing team, just never get around to actually editing that, never get around to putting it together into something, whereas a lot of the time it's better just to get it out there, like like we talked last week about Instagram stories and things like that, it's just shoot something, send it out, people react to it, that's all you need. You don't need necessarily to do a big old edit and make it super special.
A great thing about filming on your phone is people will feel that they are in the moment. It's live. There's no big production to it. There's no anything special to it. It's just you're there. This is what you see. You're not going to have a great depth of field because the lenses on the cameras don't really give the best depth of field, and everything's going to be in focus, and it's just a real image of whatever it is that you're trying to film. So it gives them that you're here with me in this moment kind of feeling.
Cool.
One thing I would say to be wary of though when it comes to filming with your phone is, as I said before, the lenses aren't the best in the world. You can't interchange the lenses, which could help in certain kind of filming situations. Also the audio. So it's going to pick up audio because it's a mobile phone. It's going to be omnidirectional. If those who don't know what that means, it picks up sound from different directions. But if you want sound from a particular place and not as much sound from other places, you're going to need to get yourself like a leather mic kind of thing, which goes on your lapel there kind of thing, or you might have to get a shotgun mic. You can get them from like Rode do one. Rode do the Video Mic Me, which is quite small, plug into the headphone jack of your phone, that kind of stuff. So there's options.
So you can still augment that. You can still actually do quite a lot with a phone to bump that up, and that it's always sound, isn't it? For me, that's like the thing that makes a difference with the quality. If you've got if the sound's rubbish, then it's hard to watch, isn't it? And I guess the other thing is, like on a phone, is the apps you use. I know, like Miles, you and me have been doing this 1 second a day thing. Yeah. Just for those that have never heard of that, tell us a bit about.
So 1 second every day is, as it says on the tin, really. You film. It's like a diary, a day diary, and you take a film throughout the day, whatever it's doing, whatever you're doing, and the app sort of edits the 1 seconds to be like a year would be 365 seconds, and it's just a really nice, it dates it and stuff. It's just a really nice way of sharing memories, and quick, snappy, and they're only short, low quality videos, but they look really nice and really well put together when they're edited together. So.
And it's just, again, it's one of those things. It's just done. So if you're a brand, or you're someone that works in a venue or something like that, and you've got something that changes every day, but it's the same every day. Just taking a video of a tree outside or the view from a window or something. Do that every day. You could create a really interesting snapshot for people of a year, or just do it for a month and get a 30 second clip of things that happen in that month. And there's just so much cool stuff that you could do with something like that. And again, it doesn't create the best. It's not the best quality, is it? It's not the most. You don't have to be the most careful about it. The most important thing is you just do it. Just get.
You're not thinking about the shot or how it looks. You're just literally recording and capturing what's going on at the minute, and it sort of edits it into a nice compact diary almost.
I think that's good though, because sometimes things can be too overly thought. Sometimes things can be too produced, too manufactured, and it doesn't look like, I don't know, for the viewer, in my opinion, you'd look at it and you'd be like, well, it looks nice, but I don't really feel much about it. I think sometimes when you're in the moment, you receive someone's moment, a snapshot of their life, you feel like you're a part of that, and it makes you connect more with the image, with the footage. So that's always good to see, in my opinion.
And I think that's with brands, that's really important, because that's what we've been talking a lot about, how you engage more with a brand, how you feel more part of it, and that's like, it's that you've been invited behind the scenes and you're being given a bit more. It's not that really polished, highly photoshopped image or that really polished glossy video. It's just, it is a bit more real. It's a bit more like, oh, this is really what it's, what it's like there and stuff. The only problem is you have to make sure you do something interesting every day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you find you've got a very, very boring video of just going to work every day.
But most people are really interesting, aren't they? Most people have got something interesting.
Everyone's got something interesting happening.
Make a cup of tea, glass of water.
Yeah. So there's loads of different options for things like that. So generally, working with an iPhone, top tips I suppose would be keep it steady.
Yep.
Don't get too fancy. Don't try and do too much with it. Augment it with things like a microphone if you want to get a little bit better sound.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you're going to get a bit of a sort of decent shot that's going to be a bit flat, but it's going to do the job. And most importantly, you've got it with you all the time. Mm-hmm. Let's imagine we've got something that's a little bit more. We want to do something a little bit better. We want to do something a little bit, a bit smarter. We're not quite at the point yet where we're picking up the phone to us and getting us into, to come down with a proper, camera equipment and lighting and everything like that. But we just want to get something that looks a little bit more glossy, a bit more high end. What do we do?
Okay, in that respect, then I would recommend someone go for something a bit more like a DSLR, or because if you can get a camcorder if you wanted to. DSLRs and camcorders, there's similarities and there's differences, but that's a whole nother podcast in my opinion.
Yeah.
But DSLR is really good because you can get creative with it. You can have, depending on the kind of DSLR you have, you can get much more of a shallower depth of field. You can have it looking like a cinema, kind of like a cinematic kind of film feel to it. You can have a lot more control over the functionality of it, so exposure, shutter levels. You can set ISOs to have much more of a crisper or a grainier picture depending on what you want to have. There's so much more to it. You can also change the actual lenses. So for example, the one we've got here, got a nice little Nikon DSLR.
Nikon and Nikon, I mean, that's...
No, it's like Adidas or Adidas. I found out the other day it actually is Adidas.
Adidas, yeah, I'd say Adidas.
But I thought it was Adidas. And Aldi or Aldi.
And it's Nike as well, did you know that one?
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah, I prefer Nike.
Nike's better.
Yeah, I think Nike's better.
That's because of like with English.
And Nikon, I think, is what I would say as well, but
So the Nikon camera.
I just thought I'd throw that in there, just a little pronunciation debate.
Fair enough.
Enjoy one of those.
But yeah, so you can get yourself different lenses. Different lenses can give you different kind of views, different kind of you can set different kind of exposures. So say you got something that's got a very low f-stop, it means you can film in lower light a lot easier. If you've got a higher f-stop, then when it gets to being quite dark, you're going to struggle in getting like really good images. Depending on the actual sensor within the camera, that's going to also affect how well it is in lower light and so forth. But there's so much more choice and functionality you can have with the DSLR to get yourself a really good, interesting image. It's just, I'd say it's a really good bet. Plus you can get other equipment to go with it as well. So for example, you have things like... Thanks, mate. I appreciate that.
I know what I'm doing, I've got this, it's fine.
Nice. You can get yourself a really good shotgun mic. For example, I've got a Rode Video Mic Pro here, which is a really good microphone, gives you really good sound. Good thing about it is it's a directional mic, so you point it, wherever it's pointing at, the sound comes through here. Good thing about Rode is they're a very, very good brand, well made. You get a nice little muffler to go over it, like a windbreaker.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty good as well. The best thing about this one is the fact that it has a separate battery, which means that the power from this is going to be able to stop a lot of background noise, filter out a lot of stuff. If you get yourself a microphone which has its power straight coming from the actual DSLR itself, you might have some problems because it's not using its own juice, it's using juice from the camera, which means it hasn't got the same kind of functionality to be able to adjust levels and so forth. But
that makes that made a huge difference to the quality of just even if the image looks great, if there's just a load of wind noise, a load of background noise, it does make a big difference. That, and it's we're talking like £100 or something like that for something like that. It's not it's not nothing, but it's but it makes a massive difference to the quality of what you're producing.
I'll say it all depends on what you want to do as well. So if you got a lavalier mic and you click on someone's collar or something and you get just click sound from that one person, that's great, but it depends on what you want to use it for. So with filming, I would say it's all depending on what you want to shoot and how you want to create something. Stability is a major thing as well. If you go in handheld with a DSLR or with an iPhone or whatever kind of camera you've got, if it's shaky, it's going to look like terrible footage.
DSLRs are horrible for shaking. So I mean, I guess going back to what you said before about camcorder versus DSLR, obviously there's there's the depth of field bits and pieces like that. There's also the kind of length of filming you've got to consider, isn't it?
Yep.
DSLR often shuts off after like 12 minutes or something like that, whereas a camcorder, like we shoot this on a camcorder because it will just run for as long as we can ramble on for. But a camcorder is always a bit steadier, isn't it? Like you can kind of hold it a bit more easily, whereas because of the big old lens on the front of it, with the DSLR, you can just be all over the place if you haven't got some sort of stability on there.
Well, they're designed to be a stills camera. They're there really to take pictures with, photographic pictures with, but then Canon reinvented the game when, I think, was it the Canon, was it the Red they brought out, or was it something else? They brought out a camera a few years back anyways, and that DSLR had really good video abilities. It was just an amazing piece of kit. So that reinvented the game basically, and a lot more DSLR started to put in more video equipment. Now the reason that they can't film for that long is to keep them classed as a DSLR and not a camcorder. And higher is to keep the tax lower. They have to be able to record to a certain period of time on video, and they have to cut off. There's ways to get around it.
Every day is a school day. I did not know that.
I'm a very smart kind of guy, you see,
That's
guys.
pretty good. That I like that. I didn't know
More than a very averagely pretty face. Anyways, but yeah, so when it comes to DSLR, you have to cut off at a certain period in time to keep the tax low and to keep it in the same bracket. If it went higher than that, then you have, well, you got to pay more money for it really. But there is a way around it, but I won't mention that. But there is ways to combat this.
Ways to do everything. There's ways around everything.
Just buy loads of batteries basically.
There's a lot of batteries. Right?
That's what you really need to do. Stability wise, with DSLRs, I would also say a good tripod's really good. You can get yourself a bit of a rig type kit to make it a bit more like you've got a Steadicam. This is like a Steadicam rig. It's all folded up cut right now, but you can pull it all out, put it on your shoulder, keep everything really steady and get a nice tracking shot of whatever you want to do. Or with this particular one here, you can put some lights into it if you want to, put an external monitor on there if you want to. You can do lots of different things. This one's quite cheap. This is like 50 quid, 60 quid.
Nice.
But yeah, it's different kind of prices. They go quite high.
Yeah. Again, it's the difference between doing something like, that's a great piece of kit that we used that on a job recently, and it's just, it's there, it folds out, it's super straightforward to set up, and you've just got it, and everything looks nice and smooth and everything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're trying to set up like a Ronin or like a proper big old Steadicam, you got hour and a half to rig it and get all that stuff balanced and everything like that. And you think, it's not. By the time, if you're trying to do something quick and simple, your opportunity's long since gone by the time you got that set up.
I would say if you've got a bit more money, you can get yourself a gimbal, which is like a handheld one. It has like an electronic counterbalance with it, so you haven't got to do too much, and it'll all do it for you. Setting the weights yourself is a headache.
We've tried using a couple of those ones. Like, we've tried to. I've given you sort of three. Like knocking around the office, like, Miles, can you see if you can make this thing work? And it's like balancing it with weights and all that. Like.
And if you change the lens that you have, because different lenses will have different weights to them, and if you zoom out or zoom in, you have to rebalance it all over again. It's just an absolute nightmare. That's why I like the one that's here, because it's simple, it's sturdy. You balance it against your own weight. It's a good little piece of kit.
Nice. So those are the key differences really then, aren't they? They're the things, and that we're talking about shallow depth of field. What that means is, just in case anybody doesn't, I'm sure everyone knows what that means, but that means you get a nice blurry background.
Yep.
That's like, and that kind of, on a really basic level, that's the difference, isn't it, between when you get that kind of flat shot with an iPhone which looks super crisp, and then when you get that kind of, you can get that like bokeh effect, you get that blurry background, which makes, when you're doing interviews, it makes an interview look loads more interesting, because and that's kind of, these are the kind of things that we're probably talking about. The people are likely to be doing, people listening to this are likely to be doing is you get a DSLR, you want to set it up, you want to interview a manager or someone that works there, or tell a bit of a story about behind the scenes about a brand. You can make that loads more interesting just by making that shot look nice and think about what's behind you, make sure that it's not all, you wouldn't want to see what's behind this camera. It's a right old mess. But here, clean, crisp.
True. That's what you need.
I think it is anyway. Yeah, if you can. See it, but. Mars always looking clean and crisp. Not casual, but crisp. So like that's kind of the thing, isn't it? It's making sure that you get if you're not shooting a super interesting thing, then kind of up your game with the equipment to make the shot look interesting. Yeah. If you're shooting something interesting, like if you're shooting a lot of action or there's something going on, you can use it. You can get away with an iPhone. Yeah. Keep it nice and still. Let the action do all the talking. Don't try and zooming in and out and
Yeah.
all sorts of shenanigans like that makes everything look a bit.
Obviously, the creativity you can get with a DSLR, you can really make something look so interesting with different kind of bits of functionality. And also with a DSLR and using the creativity you can get when you go to edit the footage, it's so much easier because you're always going to try, or if you're smart about it, you're going to shoot to edit. So you're aiming to make sure that when you get to the editing suite, it's going to be a breeze. It's going to be a lot easier. You haven't got to do as much in the editing suite if you can shoot creatively how you want to do it. Otherwise, you're going to struggle, and it's going to take you a lot longer to edit. And editing can take hours and hours and days and weeks and years if you've got a big feature film. But we're not talking about that.
Yeah. So that brings us pretty nicely, I suppose, onto how you go about the editing process and things like that. And I think a lot of people look at that and think, oh, you know, like I can't, you know, we'll shoot a bit of video or we'll do a kind of Instagram style bit where you shoot a bit and then another bit and then another bit and that's it. But there are loads and loads of ways of producing really nice finished edits using low cost bits of software, I suppose, aren't there? You know, from a phone up to using proper bits of software and things like that. So first of all, I suppose the big question is, when you're shooting, you've got thinking about that edit. What's the most important thing that you're thinking about when you're getting ready to go into that edit, Miles?
We've got to have the footage. Essentially, you need B-roll as well, which I think Aaron was sort of brushing on. Then the difference between filming on an iPhone is it's almost continuous. So there's no edit in between. Whereas if you're using a DSLR, you can sort of make the transitions and the cuts easier by having B-roll to set the scene or reveal some information, reveal some detail. But it also makes the edit and the process of the video a lot smoother and a lot better. And that's just, there's a few editing techniques and a few editing rules that people almost stick to religiously that can be broken, but having lots of B-roll, lots of good footage is definitely one of them.
Talk about, so B-roll, what's like, give me an example of some B-roll, what would that be?
So a B-roll would be, if we're doing an interview, for example, the main footage is obviously the camera and the interviewee, but the B-roll could be shots of the person's shoes, shots of, I don't know, details, if he was, you know, his clothing or weight, the surroundings, just to sort of give you a feel of what the interview is about, reveal information on the person without the person actually saying it. So it's and it also B-roll is a good cover for another don't do in editing, which is don't jump, which would be if I was filming an interview and then all of a sudden it's the same scene, same setup, but the guy's just jumped to, you've just cut something out and it's the same shot, but he's jumped from one subject to another. So it's like if you had B-roll, you can do that, nice transition, cut to the guy's shoes or whatever, and then you cut to the clip that you wanted. So the B-roll is not necessarily the subject that you want, but around the subject, just to add a bit more depth to the story. I think it's it's a big part of editing. That's the difference between a continuous shot and doing it on the DSLR. That's where you can get creative as well. You can sort of add your own.
That's a massive benefit. Like that's a massive tip for for editing something that looks polished on a budget, isn't that a thing? That's like, because you can totally do that. You don't need 2 cameras. You don't need to make it, have a big shoot for that. You just need to get your interview, and then you just need to think about it and shoot a load of other little detail bits and pieces and other things that you can then cut to. And like you said, life's so much easier. If you just got a load of B-roll, you can just keep jumping back to every time you need to cut it out. You can cut out all the ers and ums, and you can cut out the questions that didn't quite work or the answers that weren't any good. It's everything's easier when you've got that.
A 3-minute interview could be 40 seconds, and people are still interested in the subject and stuff. So.
People's like, they can't focus on something for that amount of time. So you just keep changing. There's some shoes. There's a shuffling papers or whatever else. Cool. Okay, so that's a really good tip for the editing side of things. So what are we editing on in general at the moment?
If we're on a budget a little bit. So I can only really speak from experience, and I was, when I started messing around with video, it was when I was younger on Windows Movie Maker, iMovie, and Final Cut, which is on the Mac as well. But and you've got Premiere Pro, but Final Cut and Premiere Pro are a bit more expensive. iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, they're free, they come with a laptop, and they are, I don't know, at the starting point, I guess. You don't have much scope of what you can do, and the timeline based editing tool, so you bring your footage in, sort your timeline out, and it just goes from clip to clip as it plays. There's also, through some research, there's some good recommendations on free online software. One of them was called OpenShot, and that's very similar to Movie Maker, and another one called VideoPad, which is very similar to Movie Maker as well, which is just timeline-based editing tool, but free.
And that's kind of like a lot of stuff is you don't want to invest in, you know, the Creative Suite or in, you know, it's like 300 quid or something like that for Final Cut. It's, you know, if you just want to pull something together that's a simple edit, iMovie, there's so much you can do with that. Like, it's got a lot of features that, you know, that you can kind of do to make an edit look really good. But you know, you can also edit a boatload of stuff on your phone, can't you? You get iMovies on your phone as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And on tablets too. So if you want a bigger screen to see what you want to do, you can use iMovie on a tablet. I see it's more limited than what you could do on a laptop or a PC, but with Windows Movie Maker or with iMovie. But there's still scope to do work on that.
Yeah. I guess if you're doing, like you said, you're doing interviews and you want to sort the B-roll out and you're doing all that stuff, that's a job for a proper computer to work your way through that stuff. But if you've been to if you've just been to an event and you've shot a load of nice footage at that event and you're about to get the train, you're sitting on the train home, just cobble it together, get it out so that people that are, you know, all the other people at that event, they're heading home and they're looking online to see if there's any footage or anything like that or from the event. It's there rather than it being 2 or 3 days later when you've got it in, you've imported everything and then you've done all that stuff. It's like people they want stuff now, don't they? And that's why I think the benefit of having the ability to edit on the iPad or on the iPhone or an Android equivalent. I'm going to sound like I'm kind of sponsored by Apple, but I'm sure that when they finish Android, they'll be able to you'll be able to do that as well. Low blows. Shots fired across the bow to big Android support.
Listen, I like Android. Yeah, it's good. Why am I spending more money on an Apple product when I can get the equivalent more or less?
I agree. And when it comes out of beta testing, I think it's going to be really, really good. When they finish it up, it's going to be great.
This guy's just shooting at
me,
man.
In the meantime, iPhone. So yeah, cool. Okay, so we're doing like, I think those are great ways of doing editing. What about if we're doing something a bit more complicated? We are a bit worried about matching the colour and doing we want to layer multiple shots together or things like that. This is a proper, ultimately we're doing a proper edit. What should we be looking at?
So the more creative that we've touched on them is Premiere Pro. I personally use Premiere Pro and After Effects, and that's where I do the editing and the colour grading, and that's on Premiere Pro. And if there's any effects that need to be added, that's in After Effects. That's the visual effects going on After Effects and the editing in Premiere Pro.
Okay. So now I've always used, I started using iMovie and then I moved up to Final Cut, which kind of is a natural progression from it really. And I think that a lot of people would argue the difference is pretty limited now, given that they've kind of dumbed down Final Cut as well. What's the difference? Like, what you just I suppose, tell me a little bit about why you choose to edit on Premiere rather than using Final Cut.
I think it's a personal preference for me, and I think it's a personal preference for a lot of people that use Premiere instead of Final Cut, and it stems from basically using the Adobe software it starts from Photoshop. I think all the software seems to be a derivative of Photoshop. So if you're used to Photoshop, the settings and the tools and the language that they use there, it's quite the skills that you acquire using Photoshop are easily, you could take over to Premiere and After Effects, and like the toolbar and all that sort of stuff is very similar. So as I always tell people, if they want to learn editing or whatever, get to grips with Photoshop, and it's quite an easy transition, I think. So in terms of personal preference, I've always gone from Photoshop. It was just natural to go from Photoshop to Premiere. But also what I like about Premiere is it's a track-based editing system, so you can have, say if you have multiple cameras, or the B-roll, or you can have 4 or 5 tracks for your footage and 4 or 5 tracks for your audio, so you can have a background soundtrack, you can have sound effects that go on top, you can have the interviewee talking, so it's all on its own layer. There's no chopping and changing of audio, or same with the footage, you can edit and have layers, turn that layer off, I don't need B-roll there, that sort of thing. So it's that's just how I work. I think that again comes from the layers in Photoshop, just having those layers to edit with. I find it a lot easier. I find it that's just a natural transition.
I think in terms of kind of, if you're looking at starting out doing this process, and you're thinking about, if you're thinking, no, I'm just going to do some super quick stuff on a budget, Windows Movie Maker, iMovie, that's, crack on. That's a good thing to do. Use it on the phone, use it on a tablet. That's pretty good. If you're looking to step it up a little bit and do some kind of video with a DSLR and things like that, see, I still would say step it up and go up to Final Cut, because that uses a timeline editing process, doesn't it? So that's where you kind of, roughly what the story you want to tell. You're chopping up clips and you're putting them in, and you're chopping up another clip and putting that in, and you're putting another thing on top of that and putting some audio on top of it. So I totally recognise it's a much more rudimentary way of kind of going about the process, but it's probably easier to kind of build up a story, because you haven't necessarily got to see the whole thing from the top down, which you've kind of, like you said, with the layering system, you've got to know what you want to get to and kind of build it layer by layer to make it good. I think it looks, I always look at your, when you're working on Premiere, it looks much more complicated than
I think that's what puts a lot of people off Premiere, because it does look complicated to work with, but I think once you break those boundaries and realise what you can do, and the software that it connects to as well, with the Premiere, with the After Effects and with the Photoshop and Illustrator, you can bring stuff in, and it's all like it's a master suite, and it's all encompassing really. It can do all sorts of stuff via the different software, so it is complicated to get your head around, but once you navigate through the way it works, I think it's, in my opinion, a bit.
Is there a bit of how can I put it, snobbiness about with editors? I have to basically every proper editor I know is working off Premiere, and all the people like me that have kind of taken bits of footage and worked out, right, okay, now I need to work out how to edit these properly, and I'm kind of just putting it together. Not, if we're doing a proper shoot, someone else is editing stuff, but if I'm just pulling something quick together, I'd use Final Cut, because I find it easier. But I definitely have noticed that, those people, the more basic level people seem to use Final Cut, but once you get a proper editor, they're using Premiere. I
think a part of that is because Final Cut Pro is an Apple product. So if you were to buy yourself a Mac, a MacBook, whatever you're kind of going to get of a Mac product, they might try and say, would you like to get Final Cut with that to do your editing work with? So you think, I might get Final Cut here, because I can do bits of editing. Learn something new.
Convince yourself. You're just spending that money on a Mac. It's like, I'm going to be an editor.
You know what I mean?
So I'll have a little dabble with that.
It's like GarageBand with a Mac. It's just there. You can use that. Whereas with Adobe's Creative Suite, all their things are very similar. There's different levels to whatever you can do, however you can use it. But their versions are Mac or Windows operated, and I think it gives a bit more versatility, so you don't have to be on one particular operating system. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I get pretty insular in my thinking about it's just a Mac and everything, like Final Cut. Of course it doesn't. It's not. I hate them actually.
Interestingly, the Final Cut is optimised for Apple products, obviously.
Yeah.
But to an extent where, if you were exporting the same video, the same video basically, same codec, same definition through Premiere and through Final Cut will take 5 minutes, whereas Premiere will take 45-50 minutes.
Really?
So
they just slow it down.
Slow it down.
You see a Final Cut coming through the codec. No, just slow it down. Just put it to the back. You've got some other stuff to do. Computer, just crack on with that first. Then we get that done in time. Yeah. No rush. Put up a little notice that says this will be done in Final Cut in 5 minutes.
I think with a lot of people, when it comes to their jobs as well, a lot of jobs want people who understand either Final Cut or Premiere Pro, or both of them really. But then employers want people who understand things like After Effects as well, Photoshop, other things that are integrated with Adobe's Creative Cloud or the Creative Suite. Whereas I don't know too much about Final Cut, but I don't think there's any other.
You have motion with Final Cut, so that's like After Effects is equivalent is motion and Final Cut. So you get a lot of, again, that's where I would do any kind of 3D graphics or any sort of moving text or titles or anything like that. You do in there because you can do, and it's it's amazing what you can do with it.
I think we've not heard about it.
People, but I think people generally, scratch the surface of that. I think it is a good option for people that are thinking about, you want to have a go at it, but you're not quite ready to dive into the
Yeah.
full, to the full creative suite
Yeah.
and go all in with Premiere, because I think there is a pretty steep learning curve with Premiere. Whereas I genuinely think if you know iMovie and you have a look at that, you can jump up to Final Cut and use that without any real additional training or anything like that. And there's a huge amount of free training to get you sort of up to speed on that side of things. But I definitely recognise that when you see something that's really smart and really well polished, like you gentlemen produce, that's generally done on Premiere.
I think you're going to see like us in general.
That you are both very polished as well. Yeah, that's
Stop it.
absolutely
Miles in the shirt
true.
today.
Miles in the shirt. I'm wearing a green shirt. This is,
We're the
I'm
green
casual today.
What's going on there?
It's very green actually,
It's
isn't
very
it?
green,
Yeah, that's
isn't it?
good. Very green. Cool. Any other sort of tips about things to think about when you're sort of putting together your edit?
Just on editing, you can be quite creative with how you edit. It doesn't have to be scene after scene after scene. I remember there's a cut in Apocalypse Now where they're filming the ceiling fan, and then that cuts to a helicopter, and just because of the similarities of the visual similarities, it seems like a seamless cut, and it's quite a really nice way to change the scene and to change the story. And you can do that in so many different ways. So you can do that through similarities, you do that through movement. If the camera's moving, I know we spoke about stabilisation, but if we're panning or something like that, or even if someone walks across the screen and wipes the screen, those sort of natural movements and things coming across the screen are great ways to hide and blend the cut. You're not trying to get rid of the cut, but just to blend them and make the story move along a bit better.
Yeah.
Is just tips like that. Be creative, practice, but be creative in motion, visual similarities, and just be creative with the cut. Try and hide the cut as best you can.
I think some of my sort of pet peeves, I suppose, things that people, I think, traps people fall into when they're kind of novice trying to get to grips with editing and stuff, and filming as well, is when filming it's whacking the camera around all over the place, zooming in and out because you think what you're doing is not interesting enough, so you kind of think, I'll zoom in now and now I'll zoom back out again, and you'll pan over here and I'll pan over there, and it looks absolutely disastrous. But then it's also when you edit, it's like just throw in as many different transitions as you can possibly think of. There's like a star transition, so I'll use that. And like Final Cut and iMovie are the worst because there's just boatloads of interesting looking transitions. So we'll do like a 3D cube spin, that'll look cool. And then this next time we'll do like a big white. Like, you're not George Lucas, you're not doing Star Wars, you don't need 3 different ways of wiping the screen over or doing things like that. This is kind of keep those cuts nice and straightforward. You don't need wacky transitions. They aren't going to make your video look super exciting. That is not the answer. I think another like tip that I think is really relevant at the moment is we used to always bang on about don't shoot portrait video. If you're working with this, please, for goodness sake, don't shoot it like that, because it's just completely useless at the end of the day.
Big black blocks.
Yeah, just big black blocks, absolutely rubbish. But actually, now we're kind of saying, depends on what you're shooting for. Yeah. And that, I think, is probably the most important thing that we can say is, at the start of the process, think about what you're shooting for.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on using this on Facebook in the timeline, shoot for the timeline. Make it a square, make it a portrait. Don't make it widescreen, because if it's widescreen, it's going to take up this much space in someone's feed, and it's going to be gone before they see it. Think about it. Get it. Do a portrait version. Do a version where you shoot it wide, but imagine, get your subject in the centre if you think you're going to use it, or take a cut, or edit. And that's the beauty of editing, is you can take that cut of this side or that side or whatever you need, but don't just take your one video that you've produced and then just send it out to every different channel that you're thinking of. And we'll talk another time probably about how to get the most out of your videos and how to get people to see them and things like that. But I think when we're talking about shooting, it's got to be, think about what you're going to use it for. Think about how it's going to end up, and make sure that you produce footage that's going to be quick and interesting. If it's going on social channels, then don't take a lot of time to set out the scene and do all that kind of stuff. If it's going on the homepage of your website, you've got a bit more time. You can kind of tell people a bit more of a story, or it's something on YouTube that's interesting. You can take more time with it. But yeah, just think about what you're going to do with it. I think it's really important. Yep. Any other tips?
One of them was stay away from the default transition, the stop transition.
Star wipe.
Yeah.
Star wipe. A star wipe is beautiful. We'll put one in this video. We'll put a little star wipe in.
Oh man, that's amazing.
so you can see some of the best ones. Do a little montage of good transitions. And Molly will be really pleased that I've said that now, because now she's got to do it in the edit.
I would say make sure whatever you're filming is well lit, because if it's not well lit and you can't see whoever or whatever it is that you're filming, then no matter what you're trying to do in the editing suite, you kind of just lost it really. Not overexposed, not underexposed. You got to try and get the exposure right.
Yeah, that's like another podcast, is lighting. That's like a whole nother thing. And we haven't really touched on lighting because it's quite hard to deal with lighting. We're talking about filming on a budget here, and it's quite hard to make sure. So if you are filming an interview and you want to make sure it looks good, then you, like right now with what we're talking about, you basically need to be near a nice source of natural light, or outdoors or something like that. If you want to do something indoors by a nice log fire, you're going to need some lights, and you're going to need to know how to set those lights up and know how to balance them and not make someone be blasted and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good point, and it's really hard to get that looking just right.
I think that leads on to another point as well of continuity.
There you go, mate.
Continuity. You can't have lights just flickering everywhere, and you've got to have, someone can't have blue shoes on and then the same scene he's wearing red shoes. It's got to be consistent,
I love it when people make videos trying to make continuity bad. It's talking about continuity. So you got a person walking down the street and talking about continuity, and then they're in like a red top, and then they're in a blue top, and then they're in a green top, and then they're the other way around, and like they've crossed the line, which is another technical term. If people don't know about that, Google it. And it's just quite funny. I like those videos.
Yeah, continuity is super important.
I wish I could say it.
That's the thing, isn't it? Continuity is really, really important. It's important to remember it.
What's going on?
Stop flashing that. Put that back down again.
Okay.
Yeah. Continuity is really, really important. If you do a cut, you need to remember where everyone was sitting before you started. That is absolutely vital.
Yeah.
That might not work and it might be rubbish, but hey, who cares? We can show some examples. I think we should show some examples of bad editing during this, which will be fine. I can do that bit.
I'm a stickler for like good continuity though. I like everyone to be in the same place, or at least one subject to be just always.
Someone always stays where they are.
Static.
A constant, dependable.
You can get someone who's like in charge of continuity. That one person that always knows where everyone's meant to be.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Cool. Well, no, I think that's a really. It's hard. We could go on for hours probably talking about other techniques and other things like that. But I think that hopefully gives people a really good starting point. To get cracking and do stuff. And I think that's the most important message we could give is just go out there, grab your phone, grab something you've got, any sort of camera or something, and just capture some footage and actually do something with it. Just put it on your computer, have a little play around with it and see what you can do. You've definitely got something on your computer that you can use to edit with. You've got something on your phone you can use to edit with. Just try and pull a little short video together, pop it up on your social media, pop it up on your website or something like that. See what happens. See what people think of it, and you might find that that's getting a better reaction than some of your Instagrams or things like that. So, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. We'll be back again at an undisclosed time, but probably in 2 weeks for another one, when we'll be talking about something equally interesting. I'm almost certain. So for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Say goodbye, Miles.
See ya.
Manners, honestly, they cost nothing.